In 1969, a movie called Support Your Local Sheriff came out that was a comedic western that was distributed by United Artists and directed by Burt Kennedy. The film was written by William Bowers, and it starred James Garner, Joan Hackett, Walter Brennan, Harry Morgan, Jack Elam, and Bruce Dern. Now, this film does a parody on the often filmed scenario of the Western hero who tames a lawless frontier town. And it's also a takeoff on the old bumper stickers that you used to see during that time where it said, "Support your local law enforcement." It's about the Old West frontier town of Callender, Colorado. And it springs up almost instantly overnight when a rather klutzy and hot-headed Purdy Perkins, played by Joan Hackett, discovers gold in a freshly dug grave during a funeral. They're standing there about to put the body in the ground. They're saying prayers and doing a little preaching over the body. And then once they see the gold, they decide what's more important. They pull the body out of the ground and they all start claiming the rights to that deed. Now, it just so happens that Purdy is the daughter of the mayor of this town. And this is played by Harry Morgan. You see, he and the other members of the town council just hate the fact that this whole town has become nothing but a drunken free-for-all that lasts around the clock. All of the gold that they ship out of town has to go through the property of the Danbys, which is a family of ranchers and basically bandits who control the whole shipping route of that town. It just so happens that so many people are digging for gold, they don't have time to be a sheriff. And there's not really anybody that wants the job, that wants to face up to the Danbys. Now, this all changes with the arrival in town of Jason McCullough, played by James Garner. Now, he's a calm and exceptionally competent man from back east, and he always says that he's only passing through town on his way to Australia. He's been trying to get to Australia for 4 years. After he spends a little bit more time in the town, he finds out that everything is inflated in value. A meal starts out costing $3, and while he's sitting there eating it, it jumps to $8. There's no rooms in the town. There's cots down there for $20 a shift. They sleep in 8-hour shifts. So it kind of puts him in a bind in the fact that he's going to need money to stay there. He's already demonstrated that he has an ability to shoot firearms like no other. And the mayor and the town council have noticed this. They eventually give him the job as sheriff, and he goes to work trying to clean the town up. He puts Joe Danby in the jail to be the first inmate there. The only problem is the jail doesn't have any bars on it. There's no bars on the windows. There's no bars on the actual cells. The bars haven't come in yet. They're waiting for them. So what does James Garner do? He draws a line in chalk on the floor and makes that this imaginary bar that you can't cross. He actually pours some red paint on the floor to make it look like the last guy that was in there that tried to get out had bled to death doing so. You just have to love James Garner in this role. He plays these type roles so well. You immediately flash back to his popular show Maverick. You see glimpses of it. And you also flash forward to see him play Jim Rockford in the 70s. He was without a doubt an exceptional actor that had a portrayal of calmness and wittiness that very few actors have. It's kind of funny to notice that he was born in Oklahoma, and he was born with the name James Scott Baumgardner, and that was in 1928. He eventually ended up in Los Angeles and enrolled at Hollywood High School, where he was voted the most popular student. While he was there, there was a high school gym teacher who recommended him for a job of modeling Jansen bathing suits. It paid pretty well, $25 an hour, but he absolutely hated modeling, and he soon quit and he returned to Norman, Oklahoma. He then played football and basketball for Norman High School. and he also competed on the track team and the golf team. He eventually, after school, ended up back in Hollywood and got the acting bug. He originally started out doing television commercials, and then he moved to actual television roles. And this is where he changed his last name from Baumgartner to Garner. But this was after the studio had actually credited him in a role as James Garner, and they did this without his permission. It was after this that he had his name actually legally changed. Now, it's kind of funny, this opening scene where the gold is found in a grave has been used more than once. In the movie Paint Your Wagon from 1969, during the burial service in this movie, gold was spotted in the grave by another miner that was present. And before Ben Rumson, played by Lee Marvin, can finish the prayer, his body was pulled out of the grave and everyone jumped in to try to stake their claim, just as they did in Support Your Local Sheriff. Now, this movie was actually made by the Artist Union as a way to keep many of the writers and actors and production crew working. James Garner was the only person involved with the movie who made more than scale. You see all sorts of little tidbits in this movie. The saloon name is Madame Orr's House. And that's kind of an interesting play on words, when what usually goes on in these saloons is considered Madame Orr's House versus Madame Whorehouse. They also play homage to Gunsmoke. On the wall in the jail is a wanted poster of Ben Silas. The same wanted poster hung on the wall next to the door in many of the Gunsmoke episodes. Now, the movie was the first producing effort that James Garner did with his Cherokee production company. And this was done on a real shoestring budget of about $750,000. In very early pre-production, Paramount Pictures threatened a lawsuit as the studio contended that that first scene that we were talking about was lifted from their musical Paint Your Wagon. Eventually, James Garner was able to show where the original screenplay had come from and the source material, and the lawsuit actually went away. It's kind of odd that this movie was considered an absolute bomb in the fact that it did no business in its first week, and United Artists wanted to pull the film. Garner actually challenged them and told them to leave the film in theaters for one more week. The result was impressive. A word-of-mouth effort increased the attendance until crowds were completely around the theater by the end of the engagement. The movie went on to be the 20th most popular film in the U.S. box office in 1969. Now, what's a sheriff in a town like this without a deputy? And this is a reluctant deputy, because he's familiar with the town and knows how things are there. But the sheriff eventually talks Jake, played by Jack Elam, into being the deputy sheriff. Now, you just have to love Jack Elam in this part. As a matter of fact, any film that you see Jack Elam in, you know that it's going to be a good film. He just adds a spark and a dynamic to every role and every film. It's just amazing to me what he can do to pick a film up. You can take scripts that are fairly dull and you inject Jack Elam in it in any part, and it elevates it to a different level. After they arrest Joe Danby, this ignites the wrath of the patriarch of the Danby family, and that patriarch is played by Walter Brennan. They end up mounting various efforts to get Joe out of jail, but none of them work. So they end up bringing in a string of hired guns, and that's equally unsuccessful. Now, as all this is happening, Purdy just spars back and forth romantically with Sheriff McCullough. She's had her eyes on him ever since he walked into town. Now, Purdy Perkins is played by Joan Hackett. She plays the clumsy, always getting in a mess, tomboyish character exceptionally well. Joan Hackett was actually born in the East Harlem neighborhood of New York City. She eventually became a model and dropped out her final year of high school. She kind of had her acting debut in 1959 with the role of Gail in the television series Young Dr. Malone. She was known as a great supporting actress even before she got the Support Your Local Sheriff role, but this just kind of cemented her role in history. But there's a really sad side to all of this. She was actually diagnosed with cancer in 1983. She died from the ovarian cancer that took over her body on October 8, 1983 at Encino Hospital in Encino, California. Her remains are entombed in the Abbey of the Psalms mausoleum at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. If you're ever in Hollywood, I have to tell you to go to this cemetery. This is right behind Paramount Studios, and you can freely stroll through there and see tons of stars. But this is one of those stars that took a sad situation, being her death, and had the last laugh. The epitaph on her tomb reads, "Go away, I'm asleep." In the closing monologue, Jake actually breaks the film's fourth wall and directly informs the audience that Sheriff McCullough and Purdy get married, and that McCullough goes on to become the governor of the state of Colorado, and he never makes it to Australia. And this is all while Jake becomes the sheriff, and then becomes one of the most beloved characters in Western folklore. Take a look at this great movie. This is fun to watch over and over. I still get a kick out of it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.